What's up, Lexington? Welcome back to WTF LEX, real events, real accountability, and real Lexington. And let's just face it, folks, this episode is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to go ahead and fucking warn you. Because unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Saturday evening, August 15th, a community celebration at the Charles Young Park turned into a scene of what people are arguing over this term, but it was in fact a mass shooting. More than 4 victims equals a mass shooting, and there was 5 victims, with one of them dying. 5 people were shot: a 4-year-old child, a 14-year-old, 2 adults, and a 16-year-old Di'Zhon Robertson. Di'Zhon did not make it home. He died at UK at 7:10 that evening from a gunshot wound. He was 16 fucking years old. Now, before we get into the city programs, ONE Lexington, politicians, Facebook posts, the lawyers, the mothers, the audits, the open records requests, or the joke thereof that I received, let's remember that, this Di'Zhon Robertson wasn't just a statistic. That's not what he's going to be remembered for. Now, people can say good, bad, indifferent. That's not, either way, it doesn't equal a death sentence. And you can look on both sides. I mean, people who knew him said that he was kind, determined, and eager to learn. Dora Hudson with the West End Community Empowerment Project told LEX18 that Di'Zhon was enthusiastic and creative. She remembered how attentive he was with his mother, who uses a wheelchair. She talked about how well he interacted with younger kids, and she remembered him as someone who was determined to exceed expectations. His aunt Benna Matson described him as a good kid who cared about his family, and now he's dead at 16. So before everybody starts arguing about politics, programs, race, responsibility, and who's to blame, remember the fucking name: Di'Zhon Robertson. You're listening to WTF LEX, a production of OGM Podcast Network. Real events, real accountability, and real Lexington. Let's get it. At approximately 6:48 Saturday evening, Lexington police responded to reports of shots fired at Charles Young Park during East End days. Now, I was out Tate's Creek doing my DoorDash thing, and let me tell you, the response was major. Every available unit was headed there immediately. I was literally delivering to Park Place, dropped off the order, and headed that way immediately myself. I was passed on the way by the paddy wagon, at least, I'm guaranteeing 6 units. There were several unmarked. It was a massive response. I haven't seen anything like that since last year, the Guy House incident. And here's a little caveat. Apparently, and this is according to all the reports, police officers were already working the event. This wasn't some abandoned field in the middle of nowhere, dude. This is like you're directly downtown. And this was a community celebration. There was families, children, like community leaders were there. Like, apparently the mayor had been there. ONE Lexington Director Devine Carama was there. And apparently he was within 8 inches of one of the victims when somebody started shooting. 5 people were hit, and Di'Zhon was killed. A 4-year-old was shot and is currently learning how to relearning how to walk. A 14-year-old was shot. We haven't heard too much about them. And the 2 adults, we know the ages were 39 and 41 were shot. And I've seen several reports on Facebook that several people were trampled. I mean, I've seen the videos from hospitals where they were laid the fuck up. Now, initial reports describe the 4 surviving victims' injuries as non-life threatening. And technically that's fucking amazing news. But then the mother of the 4-year-old spoke publicly, and suddenly the words non-life-threatening don't sound quite as comforting. She said her son is going to be okay, but like I said, he is relearning how to walk at the age of 4. This kid's supposed to be learning his ABCs and learning how to ride a bike. You're supposed to be worried about cartoons and toys and whether you're getting chicken nuggets for dinner. Instead, according to his mother, this little boy is relearning how to fucking walk because somebody opened fire at a community celebration. His mother publicly thanked the people who immediately helped her son and said, "You helped save his life." People ran towards those victims. The one major video that's circulating, I think it's Quidarius McCoy. Now, I could be butchering the name. I'm sorry if I am. I'm from Eastern Kentucky. We talk a little redneck over yonder. But he's legitimately in the middle of a live talking, and the gunshots pop off right behind him. And props to that dude, he ran straight to fucking help. And then people want to give him shit online for fucking showing, like, basically the very end of the video, it pans past and you see a quick flash of a kid on the ground. You couldn't identify anything. You get the idea, and legitimately going to help, and they're playing. And speaking of which, also two Lexington, I'm assuming they were both retired Lexington firefighters, L.V. Hayden and Greg Gerton, were two of the first ones there performing CPR, and were among the many people that ran toward the wounded children when every instinct in the human body is going to tell you run the other fucking direction. Remember them too. With that being said, we're going to get into a part of this story that I think Lexington needs to have an adult conversation about. Now, I don't care if you don't like me. You think I'm a dumbass who just runs my mouth, whatever. Check the comment sections. It runs the gamut from redneck meth head with no teeth to whatever you want to come up with. In fact, I like to have some new creative ones. So if you got one, let's hear it. But regardless, when shit don't add up, shit don't add up. Like, that's all I'll say to begin with. Because ONE Lexington isn't just some random nonprofit that happened to have somebody standing nearby. ONE Lexington is a City of Lexington initiative. And according to Lexington's own internal audit report, the primary goal of ONE Lexington is reducing gun violence among youth and young adults. The program focuses on prevention, intervention, enforcement partnerships, reentry, youth engagement, community partnerships, crisis response, and conflict mediation. Remember that, conflict mediation. Just keep that handy. This is literally what ONE Lexington exists to address. And ONE Lexington wasn't merely connected to Saturday's tragedy from a distance. ONE Lexington was all the fuck over this story. Everywhere you look. Its director, Devine Carama, was physically at Charles Young Park when the shooting happened. Carama publicly described somebody opening fire into a crowd at a peaceful event with women and children present. He said he was trying to keep 4 young people covered and safe. And according to Carama himself, somebody approximately 8 inches away from him was shot. 8 fucking inches. You know how big 8 inches is? That is the average male hand. A standard sized pencil. Like 3 pop cans. That's 8 inches. That is not very far at all, folks. But the actual ONE Lexington connection goes far deeper. Because the 16-year-old who died, Di'Zhon Robertson, was involved with ONE Lexington programming. His aunt told the Herald Leader that Di'Zhon participated in ONE Lexington's No Cap program. So we're not talking about some vague connection where ONE Lexington issued a statement afterward. The director was there. The victim was involved with programming, and youth gun violence prevention is the organization's reason for existing. Now, let me make something extremely clear. That does not mean ONE Lexington caused this shooting. It doesn't mean Devine Carama could have stopped somebody from pulling a trigger. And it doesn't mean that every violence prevention program is worthless because somebody involved in one gets killed. That would be a bullshit argument. But here's what it does mean. We are absolutely entitled to ask whether Lexington's violence prevention strategy is reaching the conflicts that actually lead to violence. And I have some receipts. Actual government fucking receipts. Now, I'm sure if you've listened, you know, before this shooting ever happened, I was already looking into ONE Lexington. Because of people in my inboxes, because of stories I'm hearing, because of just, I'm sorry, but 2 plus 2 ain't equaling 4 with this shit. But back in July, I filed an open records request with LFG, because I hate calling it Lexington Fayette Urban County Government, concerning the program. On July 31st, the mayor's office sent me another rolling production response. Among the things I requested were records concerning audits and oversight of ONE Lexington. And LFG sent me something very specific. The January 2025 internal audit report they provided is the only final internal audit regarding ONE Lexington that has ever been completed. So I'm not pulling from some random document off Facebook or some random post that they want to post out and throw out and pretend, claiming that there's like 150 days of homicide free when you've got Tyler Smith case where the parents had to actually leave the state and get a civil rights attorney. So I'm not pulling some random document off Facebook, like I said. I'm not quoting somebody who doesn't like ONE Lexington. I'm not throwing my opinion out there because we all know I'm not a big fan. I'm not relying on rumors. This is Lexington Fayette Urban County Government's own Office of Internal Audit examining ONE Lexington. And that audit becomes extremely relevant to the questions surrounding this shooting because it tells us what ONE Lexington actually does. According to the city's own audit, ONE Lexington facilitated 16 youth conflict mediations in 2023, and listen carefully to how the audit describes those mediations. They involved disagreements that, quote, that had the potential to escalate into violence, end quote. That it's not me describing ONE Lexington, that's the city's fucking audit. The report also says ONE Lexington's crisis response efforts included deploying advocates 31 times and conducting more than 40 violence intervention meetings. That matters because when I ask whether ONE Lexington knew anything about the conflict surrounding this shooting, I'm not inventing some responsibility for them after the fact. I'm measuring the program against a function documented by the government itself. ONE Lexington mediates youth conflicts that have the potential to become violent. ONE Lexington deploys crisis response advocates. ONE Lexington conducts violence intervention meetings. Okay, then I have a question. Did ONE Lexington have any prior knowledge to the fact that there was going to be a shooting or violence in that park? After the shooting, I'm sure you've all seen it. It was made a live post and it was deleted, but it circulated plenty and was screen recorded plenty, and it made its rounds and started circulating from a woman subsequently identified in news reporting as the mother of the 18-year-old now charged in this case. One post said, "I definitely took all the right precautions to stop this months ago." Another reference being angry on the 4th of July and going to the people's mothers' houses. Another said this gang and shit been going on for months. Now, when I first saw those posts, I wasn't going to sit there and tell you exactly what they meant. Because Facebook posts aren't probable cause affidavits. They aren't sworn testimony. You know, they're not evidence of guilt, and they sure as hell aren't a conviction. But then we got more context. The Lexington Herald-Leader reported that Griffin's attorney, Daniel Whitley, publicly addressed social media posts made by Griffin's mother. According to that reporting, the post indicated there had been prior conflict between her family and other people at the scene. The Herald-Leader also reported that in a since-deleted Facebook live video, Griffin's mother suggested her son had been defending family. Again, that's a claim. It doesn't establish self-defense. It doesn't tell us who started anything. It doesn't tell us who possessed what weapon. It doesn't establish whether anything Griffin allegedly did was legally justified. Those questions belong in the courtroom. But the reported existence of prior conflict matters enormously when you put it next to ONE Lexington's mission. Because now I want to know, did ONE Lexington know? Did anybody contact them? Did Griffin's family contact them? Did Di'Zhon or anybody around him contact them? Did police know about the dispute? Did the school know about the dispute? Did community leaders know? Did anybody ask ONE Lexington to mediate? Was there violence intervention meeting? Was a crisis response advocate ever deployed? Was this dispute ever on anyone's radar? Because if ONE Lexington knew, what did they do? And if ONE Lexington didn't know, why didn't an allegedly months-long conflict ever reach Lexington's violence intervention network? And then there's a third possibility. Maybe nobody did tell them. Maybe ONE Lexington had absolutely no opportunity whatsoever to intervene. Maybe the people involved didn't want intervention. Maybe what looks obvious after a homicide wasn't obvious beforehand. If that's the answer, then fine. I just want to know the answer. I mean, that's the accountability. But you're going to sit here and tell me that they had zero idea and no idea whatsoever, yet this man was standing 8 inches from the victim? You're going to tell me this young man was a member of the No Cap program and they had no clue whatsoever? You're going to tell me I haven't personally seen Facebook posts that literally tell these kids, if you need intervention, if you need mediation, we do not involve the police? Then I think it's fair that I ask for fucking receipts. I have seen more than one accusation that they were informed and there was basically involved. I mean, there's no way other to put it. I've heard that Devine was standing around, glancing around very nervously. And like I said, this is all hearsay from people that talk to me in my private messages and send me all kinds of stuff. I mean, if I told you half of it, it'd be insane. So let's just go ahead and look at the city's own audit. And since we're talking about accountability, let's talk about what else the ONE Lexington audit found. The audit examined activity from April 4th, 2022 to April 19th, 2024. And I'm going to be fair here. The auditors did not conclude ONE Lexington was completely dysfunctional operation. Their overall opinion was that ONE Lexington controls and procedures provided reasonable assurance that most of the general control objectives were being met. That's in the report. I'm not leaving it out just because it doesn't fit or an attack narrative, but neither am I leaving it out what comes next. Auditors identified 4 findings. 2 were rated high priority, 2 were rated medium priority. Let's talk about them. The P card. Now, see, I had no idea about this, like even before when I was looking into this, and somebody in the comment section brought it up, and I'm like, well, hell, there's some new shit to look into. Thank you very much. But the number one finding was the P card used for personal use. Priority rating high. Now, according to the audit, the director of ONE Lexington made 14 personal charges on an LFG, I love saying LFG, I don't know why, procurement card between May 20th and May 22nd, 2024. The total was $1,298.54. Now stop right there because context matters. The audit says Carama self-reported the inappropriate charges. He also paid the money back to LFG before the transactions were reconciled and before the approver could approve them. The auditors actually called this essentially the best case scenario for self-reporting inappropriate P-card purchases because it happened before anybody questioned whether the transactions were legitimate. Now, Carama's explanation was that he was on a personal trip and accidentally used the wrong card to purchase travel. kind of sounds like a little bit of a creative financing, but that's just me saying bullshit here. He said once he realized what happened, he immediately paid the city back and alerted his P-card approver. He said he removed the government card from safe payment option on his devices and stopped carrying it in his wallet. According to his written responses, he had no incidents before or after. So no, I'm not going to tell you Devine Carama stole $1,300 fucking dollars. That's not what the audit says. What the audit says is that 14 personal transactions totaling right at $1,300 were improperly placed on an LFG card. Carama self-reported them and repaid the money before anybody questioned the transactions. Those are the facts. You decide what you think about them. Creative financing or, oops, mistake. But let's move on to the missing documentation. Finding number 2 was also rated high priority. Auditors reviewed ONE Lexington P-card transactions and accounts payable purchases and found cases where proper supporting documentation wasn't provided for transactions where approved. And we're talking about purchases including event food, hoodies, gift cards, utility payments, hotel bills. The audits say event food purchases could lack documentation establishing things like event date, purpose, and number of attendees. The hoodie purchases lacked information tying them to particular events or intended recipients. And gift card, utility, and hotel payments lacked documentation confirming recipients were victims of gun violence or family members of victims as required by the program criteria. So basically, I think it should have been buying gift cards and handing them out. Again, context though. When auditors raised the issue, Carama subsequently provided additional supporting documentation. So he had it, he just didn't support it or didn't have it to begin with. But for the transactions where the auditors obtained and reviewed that additional documentation, they determined those transactions were for valid ONE Lexington program purchases. That's important because the audit doesn't establish that ONE Lexington was buying random shit with taxpayer money, although it doesn't prove they didn't. But the finding was really more about the documentation and controls. But I mean, that's still important because if you're spending public money, the paperwork proving why you're spending it shouldn't have to be reconstructed after an auditor starts asking questions. It should exist when somebody approves the purchase. That's the entire fucking point of financial controls. Carama acknowledged the documentation problem. He explained that ONE Lexington had very limited staff early on, and that much of their time was spent providing programming, street outreach, and support to people affected by gun violence. He also described new procedures put in place and to create a better paper trail. And again, they had a finding, he had a response. I'm just telling both sides, so it is what it is. Grants and purchase splitting. Finding number 3 was rated medium priority. Auditors found inconsistent language between ONE Lexington's grant agreement and how some grants were actually administered. The written agreement said recipients needed a 501c3 status, but in practice, organizations without that status could indicate they needed a fiscal agent with a qualifying nonprofit accepting funds on their behalf. The audit said the practice wasn't aligned with written eligibility language and identified potential compliance, reputational, and accountability risks. Carama described it as essentially a clerical error. He said ONE Lexington always intended to allow smaller grassroots organizations to use fiscal sponsors, but failed to amend the written scope of work to reflect that intention. Well, we meant it like that, yo. He said the language was being corrected for the FY26 grant. Then there's finding number 4, also medium priority. Auditors found 2 instances where multiple purchases from the same merchant on the same day exceeded the P-card's $2,500 single purchase limits. Both involved hoodies for the It Takes a Village mentoring program. October 19th, 2022, 2 purchases, $17.10 each, totaling $34.20. And November 3rd, 2022, 3 purchases of $16.65 each, totaling $4,995. The audit characterized these as split transactions circumventing the P-card limit. Carama said ONE Lexington misunderstood the rules. More like circumvented the fucking rules. He said they believed the threshold applied to each individual transaction instead of the total purchases from a vendor. Once the rule was explained, he said they would follow it and had no additional purchase splitting issues through the period discussed. Again, you get the finding, you get Karama's explanation, make up your own fucking mind, but yeah, you can't bullshit a bullshitter. Why does an audit from 2025 matter to a shooting in 2026? Fair fucking question. I mean, the answer is obviously not ONE Lexington fucked up some P-card transactions and therefore somebody got shot. I mean, that's fucking ridiculous, man. I mean, we've all got more common sense than that. There's absolutely nothing in these records establishing a connection between these financial control findings and what happened in Charles Young's Park. We obviously know that. The audit matters because it's an independent government examination that tells us what ONE Lexington does, how it operates, and what the city expects from it. And one of those documented functions is incredibly relevant right now. Intervening in conflicts before they become violent. The financial findings are part of the broader accountability history of the taxpayer-funded government program. But Saturday's real question is not about some fucking hoodies. It's this. Did Lexington's violence intervention system ever encounter the conflict that allegedly preceded this shooting? That's what I want answered. And the numbers actually went down. And here's another part of the audit that I'm not going to ignore. Because if we're going to scrutinize ONE Lexington when something goes horribly wrong, we also need to acknowledge the numbers when they're going in the right direction. According to the audit, shootings among all ages in Lexington dropped from 135 in 2021 to 65 in 2024. Among people ages 13 through 29, shootings dropped from 89 to 37 in the same time range. The report describes a consistent downward trend and says that by 2024, there had been a 58% reduction in shootings and homicides from 2021. Those are significant numbers, I'm not going to bullshit you. Does that prove ONE Lexington caused the decline? No, obviously not. The audit doesn't establish causation. There are a shitload of variables involved in citywide crime trends. It's not one violence prevention program, I'll guarantee you that. But those numbers have been part of the story of ONE Lexington's progress. And that's precisely why what happened Saturday deserves examination and explanation. Because I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but accountability doesn't work in one direction. If ONE Lexington gets included in the success stories when the shootings decline, then ONE Lexington should also be included in the examination when a 16-year-old involved in its programming is killed at a community event while the program's director is standing feet away. Not because ONE Lexington pulled the trigger, not because ONE Lexington necessarily could have prevented it, but because this is exactly the kind of violence the program exists to reduce. And hell, even Di'Zhon's family says the resources exist. And here's where I'm not giving you some bullshit one-sided argument. Di'Zhon's own aunt made an important point. She said the resources are here. Her message wasn't ONE Lexington did nothing. It was almost the opposite. She said we can't continue to make excuses because the help and programs are here. That's important. Government can't physically stand beside every teenager 24 hours a day. Devine Carama can't personally tackle every person who reaches for a gun. You can build programs, you can provide mentors, you can offer conflict resolutions. Hell, you can fund grassroots organizations and conduct intervention meetings, deploy all the advocates you want. You can offer alternatives. Eventually, people still make the fucking choice. So maybe the question isn't simply did ONE Lexington fail? Maybe the better question is how far can ONE Lexington actually go when people involved in a conflict don't disengage from it, even its own program members? And if people around them know something is building, how do you get that information to somebody who could intervene between 5 people getting shot? Because after Saturday, we have resources isn't a fucking enough. That's just a shitty statement. That's like saying, oh, we're praying for everybody afterwards. We need to know whether those resources can actually reach the disputes most likely to turn deadly. Now, I'm not even gonna bullshit you. I had this big section planned out for right here. Because I keep hearing all these rumors that, oh, well, he raps about violence. He does this. He does that. And I'm not gonna lie, I went and I looked up some of his music. Sorry, it's just not me, dude. The high pitched voice, I can't do that in rapping. It's not you. It's just a personal thing for me. So I went through and listened, read a few of the scripts, and quite frankly, I don't see his music unless maybe back in the day before he became a violence program director, maybe that he said some shit, but recently, I can't find anything that you would be a big, oh, I gotcha. Your lyrics are fucking wrong, because that's just not the case. And even though people say I don't practice it anyway, that's not journalism. And frankly, I mean, there's enough here without doing it. I mean, his artistic message and professional mission obviously overlap. It's young people, culture, mentorship, violence, consequences, and community. I mean, that's what I've seen from the lyrics that I've seen. I ain't going through the entire fucking catalog. Y'all can go back and through. Yeah, give him the views if you'd like to. I mean, you can clearly see his philosophy if you go through his music and everything. And not that I say everybody's music is 100% them. I mean, you can be artistic, have artistic range, but most of his stuff seems pretty rooted in reality. But eventually the songs end, the speeches end, those grants get handed out to possibly your DJ, all kinds of people. Mentoring programs happen, the meetings happen. Somebody still has to answer the hard fucking questions. Is any of it reaching young people at the exact moment when the dispute is becoming dangerous? Because Saturday, it did not seem like that at all. I mean, that's not exclusively Carama's responsibility. It's not exclusively ONE Lexington's responsibility. Parents, families, schools, police. I mean, the community leaders. Every one of them have responsibilities in this fucking community. Me being the asshole asking questions that I am. That's my responsibility that I'm taking in this community. I mean, ultimately, the person who chooses to pick up a gun and unlawfully pull the trigger bears the responsibility for that choice, obviously. But Lexington created ONE Lexington specifically because simply waiting until somebody pulls the fucking trigger was not working. The city's own audit describes conflict mediation, crisis response, violence intervention meetings. Those aren't supposed to begin with somebody laying on the fucking pavement. They're supposed to help interrupt the process before we get to that point. Which brings me right back to the same questions. If the conflict really had been brewing for months, where did the intervention system enter the picture? Did it at all? The man charged. Now let's talk about the criminal case. On Sunday, Lexington police announced that 18-year-old Jametrius M. Griffin had been arrested in connection with shootings. Griffin is charged with murder, 2 counts of first-degree assault, 2 counts of second-degree assault, and tampering with physical evidence. Those are charges and those are allegations. Obviously, Griffin is presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty. Now, on Monday, Griffin appeared in Fayette District Court by video. A not guilty plea was entered, and Fayette County Judge Bruce Bell set his bond at $1 million. You can't see me, but I was doing the Dr. Evil thing. His next court appearance is scheduled for September 2nd. And There's one detail in the reporting that was conflicted. The Herald Leader reported Griffin's attorney saying Griffin turned himself in and that police helped arrange a safe surrender. Other reporting has attributed a different account to Lexington police. So I'm not going to pick whichever version makes the better story. I'll just wait until the discrepancy is resolved, and until then, it's a disputed detail. Griffin's attorney, Daniel Whitley, has emphasized that the facts need to be tried in court. And he said something else worth hearing. He talked about young people involved in disputes not retaliating with violence. And he said, this is bigger than Griffin, way bigger than him. On that point, yeah, I think he's right. This is way bigger. It's way bigger than one defendant, because one 18-year-old may be facing criminal charges and a courtroom will deal with the allegations against him. But one prosecution is not going to answer everything that happened before 6:48 p.m. on Saturday. If there really was a months-long dispute, we want to know the history. We want to know who knew. We want to know whether anybody asked for help or whether anybody tried mediation. And because ONE Lexington is Lexington's government-backed youth gun violence initiative, I want to know whether ONE Lexington knew anything about this conflict before August 15th. Because all the evidence points to, in fact, they did know about it and they were there under pretenses that something was going to happen. I have witnesses who've seen the behavior of Devine Carama basically right before the shooting. You have the shooter's mother basically saying she's been all over the place asking for help all about this. The victim's mother, who was obviously the victim, Di'Zhon, was in the no cap program. So you're going to tell me that they didn't have any foreknowledge of this whatsoever? I'm going to call bullshit. And I'll go ahead and address this. Like, there can be two things that are true. ONE Lexington can do great things for kids with backpacks, with back to school stuff, all that stuff, and still not be doing the responsible thing with the gun violence initiative. Two things can be going on at once. I'm not downplaying the whole thing. Like, they can do good stuff, and they can also be milking the government, because let's just face it. I mean, I respect the hustle. I said this last time. He has figured out a way to get a government salary. He has figured out a way to get an entire culture who does not trust police or anybody in the government to trust him. And a lot of that, if you look at it, and this is my personal opinion, a lot of that is based on these grants that go out. Look at his DJ. Look up JK-47. Look at, in fact, look up how many music videos have been put out since he became director of ONE Lexington. And he openly says that he uses his hip hop in the ONE Lexington arena. So you can't sit here and tell me that he is not using the government to fund his hip hop career. Now, that being said, he may have been very heroic Saturday. That he may have done exactly what he needed to do. He also could have been involved in it, and for all I know, have set up half of it. We don't know. We don't have those answers. But when I see posts that he was there trying to break up a 40-kid brawl or some shit, there was definitely pre-thought. There was definitely something. They knew something was going on. They knew something was going to happen. They were already in the park. He was, like I said, if you're 8 inches from a shooting victim, you're either involved or you might have been a fucking target yourself. And once again, this is all, I got this from private messages, comments, this, that, and the other. And if you go by the comments, the comment sections have absolutely went to shit. Because apparently 5 people getting shot wasn't enough ugliness for one fucking weekend. After Griffin was arrested, his photo was published, and the racist comments and memes began fucking going off the chart. WKYT was literally, they called them out publicly for not disabling comments, basically enabling them to have a racist platform, they said. And that's another big fucking adult conversation Lexington probably needs to have. You can despise gun violence. You can demand accountability. You can believe that someone who is ultimately convicted of murdering a 16-year-old would face serious consequences. None of that requires turning a dead teenager, a wounded child, or a fucking 18-year-old criminal defendant into an excuse for racial bullshit. A 4-year-old is reportedly relearning to walk. There are 16-year-olds fucking dead. 3 other people are wounded. There are families whose lives changed in seconds. Maybe that's a little bit more important than getting your edgy Facebook comment in and getting your fucking usual suspects. You know who the fuck you are, and it's both sides. I'm not going to fucking lie. It's all sides. It depends on what is posted. You go to your local news section, comment section, you'll see exactly what kind of state this world is actually in. It's fucking terrifying. So, in all seriousness, I mean, like, what exactly are we preventing? So, where does all of this leave us? Saturday was supposed to be East End Day, community celebration, like, gathering of friends, family, remembering the history of the East End, what the East End is all about. Instead, 5 people were shot. A 4-year-old is wounded. A 14-year-old was wounded. 2 adults were wounded. A 16-year-old, Di'Zhon Robertson, was killed. An 18-year-old is now sitting in Fayette County Detention Center on a $1 million bond facing murder and assault charges. And somewhere between all those facts is a story Lexington needs to understand. Because this apparently didn't happen in a vacuum. There are reports of a prior conflict. There are social media posts saying problems had existed for months. There's a taxpayer-funded violence prevention initiative whose own internal audit documents youth conflict mediation, crisis response, and violence intervention meetings as things it actually does. One of the young people involved in ONE Lexington programming is now dead. And the director of the Lexington's Violence Prevention Initiative was standing in the fucking park when the bullets started flying. If that doesn't justify him taking a serious look into the Lexington violence prevention strategy, what the fuck would? And no, I don't want another slogan. I don't want another argument about whether questioning ONE Lexington means you're somehow against violence prevention. I'm fucking for violence prevention. That's exactly why I'm asking whether it worked. Show me what worked. Show me what didn't work. Show me what nobody knew about. Show me what somebody knew about but couldn't stop. Show me where that money went. Show me what conflict mediation actually accomplished. Show me how those violence intervention meetings documented in the city's own audit translate into somebody putting a gun down. And tell me whether Lexington's Violence Prevention Network knew anything about the conflict that we are now being told had been brewing for months. Because Devine Carama himself talks about humanity. He talks about reaching young people. Talks about violence. And Saturday evening, those ideals collided with reality about 8 inches away from this fucker. Maybe ONE Lexington did everything it possibly could. Maybe ONE Lexington knew absolutely nothing about this dispute. Maybe nobody involved ever asked for help, which we've got proof otherwise. Maybe the warning signs we're seeing now only look obvious because we're looking backwards after somebody died. Hindsight being 2020 and all. I mean, those are all possibilities. That's why I'm asking questions instead of declaring conclusions. But sometimes some things aren't speculation. Di'Zhon Robertson is dead. A 4-year-old was shot, and according to his mother, is relearning how to walk. 3 other people were wounded. Multiple people trampled. An 18-year-old is facing murder and assault charges and has pleaded not guilty. And Lexington's own government says the program it created to combat youth violence conducts conflict mediation involving disagreements with the potential to escalate into violence. So yeah, I'm going to fucking ask, what exactly are we preventing? Because preventing isn't the press conference afterwards. It isn't the Facebook post. It isn't the memorial or the prosecution. and it isn't the fucking podcast you're listening to right now. Prevention is everything that's supposed to happen before 6:48 p.m. on August 15th. Now Lexington needs to figure out what did, what didn't, and why. Because Di'Zhon Robertson doesn't get another chance. That 4-year-old doesn't get to erase what happened. That trauma will be there for a lifetime. Neither do the other victims, and so find the answers. Figure out what we could have done to prevent this shit. Figure out what couldn't. And then fix whatever can actually be fixed. That's accountability. Now, I implore you to go from here and go back and watch the video of our chief of police, our mayor, and Devine Carama, the press conference, and tell me you have any faith in our leadership whatsoever after watching that press conference. These people are the leaders of one of the largest cities in Kentucky, and you would think they would at least come out half prepared to talk. The only thing I heard from that press conference was, please don't cancel East End days. I mean, you're talking the day after, and they're more worried about not canceling East End days, and East End days needs to continue more than they were worried about the actual victims. And supposedly the chief of police not knowing about East End days, that's fucking, give me a break, guys. But obviously we have went far beyond what we normally go on What the Fuck Lex. If you hung out this far, greatly appreciated. Sorry you had to endure this amount of madness. Hopefully we get some answers. I doubt it very seriously. We'll probably just go on handing out random grants to our DJs and getting our businesses off the ground. Which, like I've said before, you do you and you get that hustle on, man. But, you know, it's on me to call it out. But on that note, I will see everybody the next time. Like, rate, review, go follow on Facebook, do all that good stuff. And the old podcast is produced by OGM Podcast Network, and I'm not doing an outro, so fuck you. Just kidding. This is What the Fuck Lex, and you have suffered through 47 minutes worth of this shit, and you're never getting it back. Love you.